begin, we do have, we always sort of have this up on the screen, if you like, when folks are entering the room, because normally our listening sessions are in person within your county and your community. And we have this up on the screen. It's sort of like a pause for thought. And we welcome you to comment on that if you feel that you disagree with it or that you agree with it. But so I think I might introduce myself, and I might say good morning. Gianna, if you could keep letting folks in, that would be super. And let me know if there's anything in the chat that I should be aware of, because at the moment I don't have my chat open so I can see the whole screen. So good morning, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be with you. And I'm going to introduce myself and my colleagues as the administering organization for Upstate California Creative Core. I'm Eliza Tudor, and I'm Executive Director of Nevada County Arts Council and a proud board member of Californians for the Arts and California Arts Advocates. And I also represent one of California Arts Council's state local partners, the Nevada County Arts Council. And so we report in a way to the State Agency for the Arts, and we also report into our Board of Supervisors, but we're a nonprofit agency, an independent nonprofit agency serving our diverse populations in Nevada County. But today we're here because we want to learn all about you, and we want to have an incredible conversation around this incredible opportunity, which is a pilot program. So I'm going to move through our slides. Should we give it a couple of moments, do you think? What do we think? Or should we begin properly?
I can't hear anything on my computer. Do you know if there's anything I can do about that?
Someone can't hear? What about others? Can others hear?
I can hear.
Great. Okay. I'm so sorry that you can't hear, but now would be the point, now would be the moment that if anyone is having background noise or needing to answer phones, that they could mute themselves. And what we're first going to do is just run through a few slides to orient you. And then we're going to turn it over to you to have a really great conversation. Good. Great. And I'm going to, and then Gianna, if you could also,
the microphone.
If you could mute folks now, that would be super, except for me and yourself and Katrina and Jemima and
You mean
Leslie.
me?
Thank you. Super. All right. So let's go to the slides now. So I've introduced myself, but I'd also like to introduce my colleagues. On our meeting this morning is Katrina Schneider, who is a scientist. Yes, a scientist, and she's been helping us analyze data from the new tool that's been handed to us by the state called the Healthy Places Index, and helping make it real so that we can marry it with your lived experiences as we move around upstate California. Katrina, welcome. And then Gianna is a coordinator for the California Creative Core. And she's always available to answer questions beyond today's listening session. And together, Gianna and I will be preparing information to send to you after this call. Everything you've heard, you will receive within about a week. So Gianna, great that you're with us too. And then of course, Leslie, Executive Director of the Ink People in Humboldt and Eureka. I'm sure you all know Leslie. She's a tour de force. And Jemima is Executive Director of Humboldt Arts Council, the state local partner for the county. I'm so delighted. We were with you a little earlier last month when we were with you in person at the Morris Graves Museum of Art. Thank you so much for that. It was such a fabulous session. I'd like to ask Leslie to lead our land acknowledgement today. Leslie, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I want to acknowledge that people in this meeting are on Indigenous Wiyot, Hoopa, Karuk, Yurok, and possibly Tolowa land. And I want to lift up the ongoing return and just ongoing living cultural practices of all of the tribes in our communities, the caretaking and stewardship of the land that the tribes have brought forward. And I also, just want to honor the labor and the unseen work of people of color that have also gone into the land and the buildings and the structures that support us today.
Thank you so much, Leslie. I mean, never has there been a better opportunity for us to acknowledge our tribes when we're thinking about possible projects and collaborations and partnerships for the California Creative Corps. We always want to be acknowledging our Indigenous peoples, but this grant program, I hope that you will see, really lends itself to meaningful partnerships with our First Peoples across county lines. So it's be thinking that as we go through today's presentation and as we hear from you and as you observe who else is in the room, be thinking, who could I be partnering with to support and lift up the voices of our least represented people? So what is the California Creative Corps? It's an economic and workforce development recovery pilot program intended to fuel positivity, regain public trust, and inspire health and safety across California's diverse populations. And I'm going to just, as we admit, I'm just going to pause for just a moment because we're welcoming now one of the coordinators for the California Creative Corps from California Arts Council itself. I can't see Julie, but I would like to acknowledge her as she comes in to our meeting this morning. This is, I think, the first listening session in the state that Julie will have attended. Am I right, Julie? Are you able to unmute?
Yes. Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, Julie, welcome.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I'll try to get the camera working as well. I see me, but it's a little weird on this thing. So yes, thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I'm late.
That's okay, Julie. So we just led Leslie from the Ink People, one of our partners for Humboldt, has just led our land acknowledgement, and we used it as a way also to emphasize the extraordinary potential that this particular program has of working with our tribal peoples and our least represented peoples historically, because of the way that the program lends itself to regional cross-county line type partnerships. So that's just something that we were talking about as you entered the room, but it's delightful to have you with us, and we hope that you'll lean in with thoughts and clarifications and questions of your own.
Absolutely, thank you.
Of course. So we were just describing what it is, and we read this slide about it being an economic and workforce recovery pilot program intended to fuel positivity, regain public trust, and inspire health and safety across California's diverse populations. If we were to extrapolate on this program from a statewide perspective to a nationwide perspective, I want you to cast your memory back, not your lived memory, but your understanding of history, to a program under President Roosevelt that developed on the heels of the Great Depression in the mid-1930s and ran all the way through to the mid-1940s and the Second World War. The Works Progress Administration that we all know as the WPA. Under the WPA, which was again a workforce development program, much like the California Creative Corps, Roosevelt created 4 distinct federal programs designed to put artists to work across America in much the same way that the California Creative Corps is doing on the heels of a global pandemic. It's the first statewide pilot program of its kind since that nationwide program. So we have much to learn from some of the extraordinary projects that came out of the WPA then. But then, of course, we lend all the scale and relativity that we need to, understanding these are very, very different times. We have our own contexts, our own challenges, our own opportunities. So, but I like to refer to the WPA because in a way to inspire the idea that all eyes are upon us in California. This is a very exciting project that's come down to us from the state. And what we hope will happen is that you, our artists and representatives from social service organizations and units of government and environmental agencies and arts organizations will gather forces and create projects that perhaps can become case studies that the state will feel so proud of and that you will feel so proud of locally and regionally, that other communities can borrow from them. So let's see what we can achieve today. So what are the main intentions of the program? So Nevada County Arts Council is among 14 other organizations across the state administering $60 million. In our neck of the woods, in the 19 counties that we are administering funds for, we'll have just under $3.5 million to administer across our 19 counties. What we want to be doing is creating public awareness around issues critical to society. And California Arts Council has made it very clear that the state is interested in issues such as water and energy conservation, climate mitigation, emergency preparedness, relief and recovery. We put this here in brackets, including fire, because we know that so many of our communities in rural California, especially in the north, in our heavily forested areas, have been so prone to fire and are so at risk of catastrophic fire. But that's just one example. And then of course, civic engagement. Why is that very specific 3 words included there, including election participation? Very often we're asked that as one of the first questions. And we always answer that the tool that we're using to measure the relative health of communities across California sees certain things as being absolutely intrinsic to the health of communities. And civic engagement is one of them. So the degree to which an individual within a community can feel safe voting or being part of the census is an important factor in determining, that person's sense of autonomy and how he or she or they can contribute to society. And that's just a small example. And then of course, social justice and community engagement, really important elements of this. And if you're involved, as we heard from Humboldt, that there are so many organizations and artists involved in social justice, we challenge you to be part of this program. And of course, on the heels of the public health pandemic, public health awareness, the state is very interested in this. This is how California Arts Council sees the state through the lens of the creative core. You can see that there are 9 regions. Upstate California has the largest number of counties to cover, possibly the greatest diversity in terms of its geography. Converging mountain ranges, confluences of river systems, coastal ranges. We have high desert and low desert and forests and everything in between. So we have a lot to grapple with. And of course, there are many ways that we can look at the map of Northern California, of upstate California. We have on the left-hand side, you can see the SERF map, the California Economic Resiliency Fund map, which shows how it considers the upstate region. We're now speaking from the Redwood Coast, and then the North State is all the other counties in our region. And that's because there are links, there are connections with folks and agencies and artists potentially who are connected and who can work together and have access to funds that can support important causes and the development and resiliency of communities. The map at the top is a UC Berkeley map that refers more to linguistic relationships between our First Peoples. And again, it's a way to encourage all of us, as we consider projects, how we can work together, who's in the room, who isn't in the room, who was here before us. Katrina, why don't you speak to this beautiful map at the bottom, which is the California hydraulic regions and counties. What does this mean to us?
Yeah, and most of all for this one of the amazing parts is looking at the connectivity between the different regions, and obviously how water moves is a huge connecting factor. It also is a huge factor for the different communities in terms of some of the situations they might be seeing. For instance, Trinity County, learning a lot about, so let me first actually say, this is if a drop of water fell, where would it flow on out? So anything in the green area actually flows out towards the ocean. Anything in the yellow area, which goes all the way up to the upper parts of Modoc County, will flow out the Sacramento River and eventually through the Golden Gate, if it's allowed to flow on out. And anything in the red area flows out into the Great Basin, which includes parts of Nevada County and other counties as well. But as I was saying, it's also super important to learn about each community and its relationship with water, its adjacent communities, how much water might be removed from their basin, like in Trinity County or with the Eel River, as it's moving to another whole basin. So you end up in two different areas in some of these situations, two of these watersheds.
Thank you so much. And of course, we know that water relates to other things such as forest health, forest management, all manner of ecologies and the ways that communities relate to one another, and fire, of course, and even clean air. All of this relates. And then, of course, the map to the right, which is a physical and a transport map. It's another clue when we're talking to communities. We're saying, how do you get to your nearest county? What are the natural ways that you relate to your nearest county or your nearest peoples? And let that be another clue, another inspiration for how to work together. So let's look at our 19 county region at a glance. So we have 374 census tracts across 19 counties, 31% of California's total geography, but only 4.2% of our population. And that's because we're so spaced out, spaced out is probably not the right phrase. But of all regions, perhaps we need to be sensitive to the idea that our populations are spread out, and all the more reason to reach out beyond our bubbles, if you like. We have 3 primary watershed regions. We have incredible precipitation averages, from 14 inches a year in Modoc County to 95 in parts of Del Norte. We range from sea level to 14,000 feet at Mount Shasta. What does that mean for us? How can it possibly affect? How does it relate to our health? And then mixed economies, everything you would expect of rural California: agriculture, timber, ocean fisheries, mining, tourism, and energy. So a very, very quick, you might be thinking, with such incredible geographic scope and diversity, how on earth will we reach and serve our diverse populations in upstate California? When we initially reached out to California Arts Council in our application, we said we would work with our entire network of state local partners in each county, and all over California. One agency reports into the state and seeks a resolution each year through our county board of supervisors, naming us eligible for a state local partnership program so that California Arts Council can better serve, in turn, diverse populations and hear from us on what feels important to local communities with all our diversity. In Humboldt, we've made an exception. We know that Humboldt, with its connections, both with Del Norte to the north and Mendocino to the south, and with Trinity and Siskiyou, Humboldt has incredible regional connections, and it's also very large, and it has incredible connectivity, if you like. And we thought it would be really interesting, especially because Humboldt Eureka particularly is a California cultural district. So is Nevada County Arts Council. We have 2 California cultural districts. And we understand the incredible work of the Inc. people. So we want to work in collaboration with both Humboldt Arts Council and the Inc. people who will work together in service to you. So after this listening session today, both the Inc. people and Humboldt Arts Council will very much be point agencies for you, offering you support and technical assistance, professional development, and we'll be with you together throughout the whole process. So here I'd like Katrina to just leap in and let's share a really, really brief snapshot of what Humboldt looks like.
Yeah, well, whenever we come into any area, we really love to understand more of the details. And so it's super fun with all 19. We've learned quite a bit and look at both of these components of geography of the land, of the rivers. So again, understanding that connectivity, how water's moving, what's happening. We look at the public lands and ratio of public to private lands. In some counties, we learned quite a bit of how this can impact the tax basis and tax revenue in an area, and also understanding the forested lands, of course. Your area particularly, huge kudos. I mean, you have the 40% of the remaining old growth coastal redwoods are in this county. So looking at colleges and universities, it helps us understand some of the indicators to do with education. Can someone stay locally and go to an amazing school like Cal Polytech, or do they have to leave the area to go to college? And then as well as looking at the tribal land and the existing reservations, as long with the historic residents of the area.
Thanks, Katrina. We also have, usually on the page that we've just looked at that Katrina spoke to, we have one bullet point for community resource groups. And what we like to do is make sure we're recording in advance all the community resource groups we can possibly think of. And it's hilarious because with Humboldt, there are so many. And Leslie created this beautiful page for us. Let the names of the agencies be clues to all of you artists in the room and all of you agencies who are represented here. And if you're not represented here, that's why we want you to put in the chat if you have an affiliation and you have an interest in perhaps in partnering with and employing artists, then make sure that we know that in the chat. But it's unbelievable the potential for partnerships and projects within Humboldt. Look at the number of resource groups that you have. It's seriously inspiring. And this is just to say, when we first visited Humboldt back in November, we had just come from Del Norte, and the week before we'd been in Humboldt, and we were combining our listening sessions with Californians for the Arts Redwood Coast listening sessions as well. So we've gone through every county relative to Humboldt and had the same conversations. Let's have a look at fire. We talked about fire a little earlier. Would you like to talk to this, Katrina?
Sure. I mean, looking at areas, we've been through some regions with massive fires, of course, and trying to understand sort of the history of fire. And this one actually covers over the last century. So the light green ones are the fires that occurred in the earlier part of the 1900s. And the fuchsia and pink colors are the later fires, the ones that have occurred much more recently. Now, obviously, if you look at this, you can see a sense of scale of difference of those size of those fires. And that's something we've seen on the ground in quite a few locations. The fires are burning bigger, hotter. So again, looking at this as it relates to communities and their overall quality of life, not just from the fires and the risks of evacuating, but also the smoke and the smoke impacts.
Thanks, Katrina. When I first looked at this map, I thought it's actually a map for which you two will have a link. Perhaps we can, Katrina, if you could see if you could dig out that link and place it in the chat during this call, it would be great. When I first looked at this map, I was blown away by the beauty of it first and foremost, because I tend to think through the lens of an artist as well. But of course, it's terrifying, but it tells a story. And this is an example in one way of how art can tell a story. It is simply terrifying looking at the trajectory of fire over the course of 100 years. in our own county, for example, we have lots of tiny green areas, and yet 70% of our county is forested. That probably means we're overdue for a catastrophic fire. And again, that's a clue for our community. Do we want to create a project working with artists that prepares our community for possible disaster response or emergency preparedness, etc., etc. Treat every piece of information about your own landscape as a clue to a project that you might want to partner with agencies in or create yourselves.
Yeah, and an invitation, because obviously, what do you want it to look like in 50 years? What can we do about that? You know, if we have a lot of fuel,
Right.
how do we convey that? So everything is an invitation to our future.
I just want to make a comment here, just because I've been sharing all the links. So I know folks are probably very focused on the presentation, but if you look in the chat, you can find the links to all these resources that we're sharing.
Thanks so much, Gianna. And Katrina, why don't you speak to this? We're looking at, what are we looking at here?
Wow, well, again, amazing watersheds, forests, everything up there in Humboldt County. We were looking, we had the honor of being up in your region at the announcement of the Klamath Dam removal. This is going to be a very large scale impacting project in the area. So we just try to understand what are some of the other regional opportunities, particularly in terms of collaboration or for the tribes. This is the beauty of Humboldt here before you.
It is extraordinary, isn't it? Looking at it, Katrina, because it's like a massive artery that runs through a large part of upstate California, our region. So in itself, it is an invitation. When we get to the listening session, which we're going to speed to very quickly, we'll want to hear from you. You tell us, knowing what we have heard about the Klamath Dam removals, maybe you have ideas that you want to run through. Maybe you're in search of partners, so let's hear them. So we're going to share with you today, we're going to do a really, really brief live demonstration of a special tool that's been given to us called the California Healthy Places Index that measures the relative health of communities across the state. Within that index, within that map that we're going to share with you, is a very, very important section. The default way that we look at the Healthy Places Index is by census tract. And we'll talk about why that is in a moment. If you scroll, if on the map, it will also share with you for every single census tract in Humboldt, it will give you the demographic breakdown. And this is incredibly significant and very important. This is the overall picture for Humboldt County. But if you were to click on one or other tract within Humboldt, you would find slightly different and sometimes dramatically different demographic shifts. And your question to yourself when you're thinking up projects that relate to specific tracts or specific regions or counties is, who's in our county? Who are the least represented? Who are those that have been here since time immemorial? Who are the voices in the room? How can we partner? How can we uplift? How can we make those voices central? So we wanted to share this with you very explicitly, because of course we know that there is a relationship between healthy communities and race and culture more broadly. So this is what it looks like. And Gianna's going to share the healthyplacesindex.org link so you can follow along as we go through. It's a website. The Healthy Places Index was created by the Public Health Alliance of Southern California. Don't let that put you off. It's actually being picked up on by states across the nation who are so impressed with it as a way of viewing their own communities that, for example, a couple of weeks ago, it was adopted in Utah. We've been in touch with the California Healthy Places Index folks in Southern California throughout the process since October the 1st, when our administering organization grant activity period kicked off, both challenging the data that we see and asking in-depth questions. So when you look at this map, you'll see two colors, blue and green. If we were together in person, I'd be saying, what do you think the dark green area? You'd probably be arriving at the conclusion that the dark green areas are the most healthy areas within California. And to the degree and with the disclaimer that this map does not necessarily mirror your lived experiences of your region, there do seem to be general parallels between a community's access to resources in order to thrive and its population density. So you'll see that upstate California looks pretty blue, right? There are some pale green areas, even a smatterings of dark green around some of the more densely populated areas, but there's a lot of dark blue. The darker the blue, the more interesting this becomes in terms of the potential that the California Creative Corps has to create change with artists at the forefront and being paid for their work. So here we go. Katrina, do you want to speak to why census tracts? Why does it land on census tracts, this map?
Well, most of all, census tracts are of the different features. They're rather continuous over time. So we want to have something that we can compare data over long periods of time if we really want to be able to look at trends. So they're often mimic either roads or riverways. So census tracts end up giving us the most comparable, I mean, the most steady regions to compare.
It's absolutely fascinating. You mentioned the idea of following, the idea of population density and health, for example. If you look at the far base, which is, there's a sort of green, a pale green area that pretty much follows the I-80 highway, which we know is dense with hospitals and schools and retail density and many different markers for health. So if you remove those, then you find communities slipping underneath what we call the lowest quartile of the Healthy Places Index, and those are those communities with the very dark blue showing on the map. Here, when we go into the map, you'll see that you can click on any single census tract, and immediately on the left of the map, on the left of the screen, will pop up what the markers are for community health, whether economic, education, social, transportation, neighborhood, housing, clean environment, healthcare, access. And you'll want to know what do they mean? You'll want to know, maybe you want to challenge them. And if you were to click on the little downward arrow on any one of those markers, so for example, housing stands out in Humboldt as being sort of in a danger zone. Clearly within the peoples in this county, for housing are within the lowest quartile of the Healthy Places Index. Again, that's a clue what kind of possible projects can come out of the California Creative Corps in partnership with artists that draw attention to these things. Again, when we do our live demonstration, we'll dip into some of these census tracts and we'll look very specifically at what's pulling this data in that direction. Would you like to speak to this, Katrina? It's like an overall look of Humboldt in terms of the data.
Yeah, it'll be very important to go specifically back, like when we said before, into the census tracts themselves. I find them the most useful. But as for a glimpse for all of Humboldt County, this is the entire county score in the different categories. And so it is an averaging sometimes of extremes, right? Because you have some counties that might have very low per capita income, some very high, different regions, different ways that you're pulling together the data. So again, highly encourage you to look at specific areas, but use this as well to understand as the county overall areas that there might be more strength in that can lend resources, or maybe the whole county overall is weaker in some of the regions and some of the areas we're looking at. So it might take a larger project that is more county-wide. So in this one, it shows just so you know, if you haven't heard about percentiles before, the percentile basically is indicating Humboldt's overall score is 35.7 percentile. So that means that it has healthier community conditions than 35.7% of other California counties. Another way to look at that would be, say, it has unhealthier conditions than 74.3% of counties. So, and yeah, Eliza already mentioned about housing. So when we look more closely at that, I think it'll be most useful when we go into a specific track for you to look at some of that data. Noting as well, again, that generalization about, racial diversity. When you get that average for the county, you have the max Native American population at 4.6%, but at track 9400, the population is 81.3%. So again, look for those different pieces.
Thanks. And again, this presentation is shared with you so that it thoroughly you absorb that it's there for you as a resource as you're considering projects. It's a way of readying the field. We have 19 counties to serve that have very distinct populations, and within those distinct populations are further more refined pictures that you yourselves can draw upon when you're considering projects. So let's do a live demonstration. And just before we leap in, we land on the map. There's no kind of county lines that we'd be able to follow. It was one of our first sort of frustrations. We called the Public Health Alliance of Southern California and we said, why can't there be an overlay with counties as well? And they said, maybe in a future iteration. So we asked our designer to create just a little slide that had the overlay. So you can see, if you look at Humboldt, you've got everything there. You've got very dark blue regions, you've got very pale blue regions, which means that community conditions are somewhat healthier than in the dark blue, but there's something pulling them down. And you'll want to look, if you're interested in doing a project in one of those light blue areas, you're going to want to dive into the Healthy Places Index and just see what it is that's pulling those communities down in terms of the data that the Healthy Places Index is using. And again, you'll want to apply your lived experiences. That's like our big disclaimer for you, because more and more we're seeing that there is a little bit of a cognitive dissonance sometimes between what the data shows us and what you experience locally. And what you experience locally is what we want to hear about. So I'm going to stop sharing here and I go into the Healthy Places Index, and I am going to share this with you. Bear with me 1 second. I'm going to share the screen. Here we go. So it opens on this page, and then you're going to click on that button that says Visit the HPI Map, and you're going to click on that, and it takes a while to load. And I'm so keen for us to start listening to you. So we're going to really whiz through this, Katrina. So if there was one area that Katrina or you'd like us to focus on, please tell us what that might be, and we can go straight there just as a little example.
Yeah, and as a heads up, Eliza, I don't know if it was for others, but you were getting a little wobbly in voice on my end. So it might be because you're going into this data. But I would say, why don't you go up to the Hoopa Reservation? It's track 9400. Just to start out. I mean, I know we could go into Eureka, but so go up to, you're looking for track 9400. And it should be there in the dark blue, and it should pop up as you come on in.
Just switch my hotspots. It will serve me better.
Let's see. Did she freeze? Eliza, are you still there? Or am I out? Can you hear me, Gianna?
We can hear you, Katrina, but not Eliza.
Okay, so
Katrina, tell us which track to look in. I've
yeah,
just
94.
switched.
You're looking for 9. Okay, you're looking for 9400. So I'm pretty sure you're sorry, I didn't have it open myself for you. I'm trying to move my cursor on your map. It's pretty silly. So go to that big rectangle. See it? There you go. That big square. See the one
This
that's like this definitely does not follow watershed boundaries. This follows tribal. Go over to your right into the dark blue
Okay.
and see that square. There you go. See that big square? The only square one
Yep.
we have anywhere. Up north.
That's not
There you
the
go.
right one, Katrina.
Yeah, you see the square? It keeps coming in. You see that one where that square? There you go.
Oh,
That one.
there. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Great.
Gosh, I was moving your cursor and everything from my end. That was pretty crazy. So there we go. I mean, obviously, as we go on in, this has the lowest economic indices in all of the county. It's low for all three of the indicators for the county. They're all dark blue. I was surprised seeing on education, it's very much buoyed up with a high educational score, although it does have the lowest in bachelor's education. So I don't know what you would like to open up and look at. I'm just sort of highlighting some of the things.
What would be great if Leslie, maybe you guide us, tell us where you want to go with this, and because you were with us for our first listening session, what do you think would be the best way to use the small amount of time we have today?
Was that to me? Well, I think to use the rest of our time, or this?
No, is there a particular place on the map that you'd like us to look
okay.
at?
I see. I think it's interesting to kind of look at kind of the larger, more rural blue areas, and then also kind of comparing that relationship to the more urban areas that are also blue. I feel like people here, there's a good number of people from Southern Humboldt, so it might be good to swing down. Let's swing down to Southern Humboldt first, just so folks,
Great.
since that wasn't on some earlier maps, can kind of see those areas.
Great. So are we kind of more or less in the right areas? Tell me where to go and we can have a look.
Yeah, I think Garberville, like Redway.
Leslie?
Yep.
Garberville, let's see. Yeah, okay, go there. Okay, great. So if we look at this, bearing in mind there are folks on the call from this region, I'm wondering if that's a river here that's also running the wiggly bit.
Should be the
In any case, if we look at these indices, these markers, what you want to be doing is, what is it that's creating this, that's pulling, which indices, which markers within the Healthy Places Index need some tender loving care? So obviously the economic, social, housing and healthcare access are all issues. If we were to go into the economic section, Katrina, I'm going to do this, and then if you could speak to that, that would be super. We're looking at employment, aren't we?
Yeah, and I was actually pulling it up on mine too, to sort of jump ahead and look at some of the indicators. But yes, you'll see what's pulling it down, and the comparison of this tract. I mean, that's one of the things I'll highlight most of all. That graph that Eliza just pulled up there shows this tract in comparison to the county score. So again, there's something going on that's different than the trends within the county, and trying to dissect and understand what those are. Are there resources? Are there tried and true things that could be brought forward to this area? You know, what's the driver for this indicator there? Again, as Eliza keeps steering everyone towards, let this guide you into the question and the curiosity, but your lived experience and the data on the ground and what people know, that's what really we want to know. That's what you want to bring forth.
The beautiful thing about the Healthy Places Index is that at any given moment, you yourselves can consider what's the connection to health of being employed. You can see here, it gives a beautiful piece of narrative about how every household should be able to afford the necessities of a healthy life, whether medical care, healthy food, quality housing, education, and other basics. Stable employment allows people to afford the goods and services that are necessary for good health. research indicates that economic opportunity, especially having a job, is one of the most powerful predictors of good health. And that impacts on health are especially pronounced for people in or near poverty. Now, when we were in Tehama a few weeks ago, we actually were hosted by the Job Center in Tehama. And they had already come up with the most amazing projects. They have this incredible executive director who'd already got all these artists together, and they wanted to show us all their projects. I said, well, we're not quite there yet. This is fabulous fodder for brainstorming. And indeed it was. So I'm gonna skip out of here. Is there any other part that anyone would like us to look at? Maybe put in the chat while we're here. To dive a little bit deeper into, but know that you can do this in your own time as well.
And I'm just going to highlight, it's okay that you left in there, but just do look a little further, because as I'm going on my own, looking at the very low scores for healthcare access, you know, what's that about? Looking at the housing scores, the low housing scores with housing habitability, and then as I love how Eliza always puts out, what can artists do to bring awareness around these issues? So that invitation of looking at the bigger picture of this community.
Absolutely. And I will say that we've received such great responses, such diverse responses, you know, from sort of abject fury at the Public Health Alliance of California, assuming that it can tell us what our own communities look like when we're the ones living here and we know what's really going on. So we're saying to you, tell us what's going on. Challenge us and create your own story around this. Make it real, and make it real through partnering with, you know, agencies that might have expertise, while you have the vision as artists, etc., etc. In Mendocino, for example, it became clear to us that, you know, obviously the Public Health Alliance of Southern California has no idea of the Back to the Land movement in Mendocino and how people choose to live far from others, and therefore retail density probably isn't a marker for community health. So it's amusing and also real. We're going to be learning a lot. This is a pilot program. We have California Arts Council listening in today, absorbing this conversation. I am going to stop sharing because I do want to get to the listening, and I'm going to go quickly back to the slides and we can dive into the listening session. So, and you saw that when we expanded into Humboldt, I know that there are quite a few people from Eureka with us today. There is some serious stuff going on in Eureka that you can barely see when you look at the overall map. So for those of you in Eureka that want to do Eureka-led projects, make sure you burrow down and dive down and see what's going on there. And then keep sticking to those dark blue areas and then challenging yourselves and each other and us. Just a note.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was just gonna say, and if you do have thoughts, particular indicators and things and metrics, ways of looking at community health, we're really listening to those as well and pulling that together because, you know, we definitely have noticed some of the indicators. For instance, one of them is forest canopy, and we do understand the linkages between really dense forests are a lot of what's driving the massive scale and the amount of destruction from these big forest fires. So forest canopy doesn't necessarily, in the rural communities, it's not necessarily the best indicator for environmental health or neighborhood health. So just like, as well as Eliza pointed out about retail density as well. So please do give us that feedback because we really do want to convey the voice of what are the indicators that might be more representative for our more rural communities.
And I will share with you that Nevada County Arts Council has just completed a 3-year project employing 20 California artists and working across multiple sectors to make sure that we have folks who represent expertise from very different perspectives, all coming together to describe the 13,000-year history of our forests and sharing with the public, with the community, what healthy forests actually look like. They do not look dense. The canopy is not dense. They are not at risk of catastrophic fire through, heavily dense, low growth, et cetera. So we do want you to even though it's not part of a requirement as an administering organization for us to inform the Healthy Places Index, you can rest assured that we will be through our own lived experience. So let's just quickly go back to this slide just to say, now we want to hear from you. What are the factors that might determine how much a county or a region will be apportioned? Obviously, it's going to be in part the county density of blue area tracts, i.e. communities that fall within the lowest quartile of the Healthy Places Index, or at least your persuasion to us of why the data falls short of describing the real picture of health within your areas. Perhaps we should be taking into account county population, county geographic size, county tribal and ethnic considerations, cultural considerations. Of course, we'll be looking at overall proposal strength. And as I mentioned before, the likely longevity or sustainability of projects beyond the pilot program's grant activity period. Imagine yourself coming up with a project that you are so proud of, that does such a great job, whether by yourselves as individual artists being paid for your work, or in partnership with agencies that have expertise to lend to your vision. And what might that look like if it were an ongoing project within your region, or borrowed by another part of the state or even country? So think case studies when you're proposing a project. Perhaps we should take into account the ability to apply the project as a model for other counties, as we've said. And of
Eliza,
course,
quick thing.
yeah.
I don't think we're seeing your screen if you're wanting us to see the PowerPoint still right now.
Really, I'm so sorry.
That's
Yes.
okay. It's nice
Forgive
seeing
me.
everyone's faces. It's great.
Can you see that now? You can
I'm
see
not
that?
seeing it.
We still
No.
can't see it.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. I know why. I'm so sorry. And great. Here we go. Great. So these are the things that we're considering. So you're welcome to take screenshots, but we will be sending this to you. And we actually already have a Spanish version. So we deeply, because of the the high population numbers of our Latino populations in upstate California, we do encourage you to share our Spanish translations with friends and colleagues and within your networks and any entities that you might benefit from this knowledge. Also, we just want to sort of provide a little bit of a disclaimer, if you like. The data that the HPI index actually shares is captured from the 2020 census. So, there are things that it does not capture. So, for example, when we were in Lassen County, driving north from Plumas, we drove through the little town of Greenville, which you may remember hit the news last year because it was entirely incinerated. So we drove through a town, it was absolutely heartbreaking, that had been burnt to the ground. And in the middle of it, and of course, none of the data about the county's population that suffered as a result of the fire had been captured by the Healthy Places Index. So when you're writing your proposals to us, we will be taking that into account. We know more than it knows. And just to say, when we did drive through Greenville, it was heart-rending in that we found a group of Greenville who had gathered around and created what in England we'd call a town square or a village square, and were creating a hub of activity and commerce. It was extraordinary, actually. It was very beautiful, a wonderful example of exactly the kind of work that the California Creative Corps is encouraging. We want to hear from you today. What kind of grants should we offer? Should we offer small grants for individual artists? What does it cost in terms of livable wage, and how long should that residency be? Should we be offering discretionary or high impact grants, cross-county, regional size grants, etc., etc.? So we want to hear from you. I've stopped sharing now, and I'm going to take myself off the video. And this is where we really want to turn it to you. We have at least another half an hour, longer if you need it. Let's start talking. I'm looking at the chat now for the first time. Let's have a look at some of these. Gianna, are you seeing any particular? Why don't we use the?
I think I would say Denise just wrote a comment that I actually think it's really great to bring up here while the whole group's here.
Yeah.
Denise, would you be willing to share what you wrote? Is Denise Hernandez?
Hello. Yes. Thank you so much for giving me the time for this. So yes, like I think that I have like all these experiences like pretty well on my skin. I'm a person that I've been working 10 years on the fields, like an immigrant, and displaced from my country because of the narco violence. So like a professional, like a biologist, I have like this like background knowledge of statistics and data, and I understand and I love this. And when I'm working with communities like an activist, I can see like how important it is like maintaining those information. And when you make like kind of like, I don't know, surveys, or when you want to welcome them to a projects or programs, the people is fearing a lot. The people, they have in their head that the migra will just to catch them, that they don't have the right of anything, that we don't have the right of health, education, etc. I wasn't knowing that by myself until I started to work for a nonprofit organization where we was like learning more about the resources and trying to find bridges between different organizations and like, for example, health services or educational services, art services also. And you can see that, no? It's like first you have to break all the trauma from the families that they've been like going through, and then take out those ideas that they are not like welcome, that they are not that they are not welcome because of their color or their race, no? And this at the end make a really hard barrier for have a real statistic, because they just don't want to speak, they just don't want to be represented because of this fear. And for me it's hard because it's not just going and asking like, hey, how you feel, what you want. It's like making a deeper conversation and a deeper work because all these traumas, no? So when we are speaking about projects, it's really hard to feel that we can be able of even getting those, or we can be like not just represented, we can be also the persons that we are indeed making that job, no? Like who are the ones that we know more about us than us, no? So I would like to see, for example, more people, not like for like the anthropology, no? Like seeing like white anthropology is like looking for indigenous, like their behaviors. That's weird. That's like something that we don't continue need, no? We need for real representation on the projects where professionals, immigrant professionals, they can for real understand and project in these programs what is happening to the families. And even if it's harder, we need to go to those communities. For example, South Humboldt, all this cannabis industry is making a really hard time from the families because the kids, they just will see this culture, guns, drugs, soil, farming. And there is any like, for example, exists like community resources or community places where the families, they can go there and enjoy their time, but used to be really like privileged and privileged community that they can be able of going to those places because the migrant people is always working. We don't have any chance for even drinking clear water. I've been working in these places where I can see the families coming from the mountains from Mexico and being traded like with lice to this place where they can continue working without going outside. they are like slaves. They don't know another language. They don't know a lot of words in Spanish or in English. So they get abused because of these reasons, no? So if you are not like having water, if you know that they will like, I don't know, if they have this idea of the migrant, no, sorry, of the migra, like just outside of their houses, like trying to catch them. For example, we are in a sanctuary county, you know, and we know that ICE is not being like, is not able of being here. So I know that a lot of organizations, we are doing a lot of things here in order to have more representation and hear more all that people, but for sure exists some places where we are not being seen these situations because they are like so rough and so hard that there is a lot of people that we are not even aware of that, no? It's like exists so much worse scenarios, people that they can move, that they can drink water, that they can speak. No? So I would like point this and know that there is really, really, really vulnerable people, and we need to support them and hear them. Yeah, pass.
Denise, thank you so much. That it's just, this is why we do listening tours. It's so important. You're on the ground, you know best. I have a question for you. I'm hoping you're going to tell me that you are in touch with, you're familiar with Humboldt Arts Council and Ink people locally. Do you have a project in mind? Do you have artists in mind or anything in mind? Or perhaps you can follow this call with a very specific conversation with Humboldt Arts Council and Ink people, and perhaps dream up something together.
Yeah, like actually now we are like working in the Ink for People and in Mars, a project of Animando el Cambio. I'm the teacher of animator, like 2D animation, and also the cultural reach, like trying to have like multi-generational class, you know, and also multilingual class. So I think that the teens, they've been speaking how they feel, how their parents like been feeling, what means like being under this culture where they don't feel like any kind of identity, you know? It's like, I'm not from where are my parents, I don't feel that I'm from here. So they start to lose their own like like power of feeling themselves, no? And I think that in this workshop we will trying to reinforce that. Is like in the present we need to create a culture present. Like yes, like we have to honor the past, we have to honor the future, but we need to focus on the present and we need to heal now. And it's important that we feel empowered and that we feel important and that we feel that we can be creative. And my idea is that, no, like reaching out for those that they can even speak or they can move. For example, I would like to have students from the South, more students for the South, but it's not possible because it's a lot of money for gas, for example, for coming up to the city. Like if we can like spread more the culture and the spaces, like have cultural artistic spaces, for example, in South Humboldt, like having like some chances of going to the mountains, of going to places where the people can reach even.
So I think this all sounds like that you already have the seeds of a fabulous relationship with Ink people which now might be able to flourish into ideas of the project. I love that you've mentioned intergenerational learning. I know California Arts Council is very excited about the power of intergenerational learning through the California Creative Core. And this is wisdom that is passed between peoples of different generations, perhaps outside the classroom. California Arts Council has an incredible selection of formal education programs. And of course, we know that there's been an important ballot 28 just passed in California, which will fuel arts education in schools. But this intergenerational community-led learning is so important. And so it sounds like you have the beginnings of something. And I know that Leslie is going to want to keep speaking with you. So thank you so much, Denise. I want to answer someone on the call, Sean. I don't know if you're still with us. I love this comment. It says, small money for big appetites. Distant management based on remote data is out of touch with rural communities. on the ground. I recommend making grants to our regional lead agencies and have them direct the funding in our region. You're absolutely right. This is a small amount of money. It is for the issues that it wishes artists to get behind. Remember, Sean, this is a pilot program. If we do well, who knows, the sky is the limit. Let's do it. You seem to work for an organization called Access Humboldt, which could be an agency that puts artists to work and pays them to do projects that you know and that you have expertise around that we don't locally within your community. So I throw that challenge right back at you, and hope you will fly with this. Know that when the peer review panels meet, those peer review panels will be made up of local experts in Humboldt. Yes, we will form part of the panels because we have to have some kind of overview as an administering organization, but the majority of panelists will come from Humboldt. They're your people. So I challenge you deliciously with that, to go out and start thinking creatively. There is money on the table. It may not be enough. When is it ever? But let's start somewhere. Any other things from the chat? Leslie, are you seeing anything in the chat that would be great to hear?
You know, I have just a question, I think, from people here in terms of, you know, and maybe also for you, Eliza, in terms of, you know, there's models I've seen where funding is going to artists who are kind of visionary leaders, such as I put in the chat, the Indian Collective, that funds Indigenous artists, not to do a specific project, but really to kind of dream through their leadership and to create projects based on that. But it's not like they have to say, I'm doing this project, right? And so I'm just curious if all of this funding is going to be project specific, or if there might be some space that's really saying, okay, there are leaders in our region, there are leaders, and we want to kind of give them wings and say, go. You know, it's just, and I don't have like a huge bias. I'm just kind of curious maybe from people here, if there's a sense of one or the other or something else entirely in terms of types of grants.
Please also, folks who are on the call, use the reactions. Put your hand up so that we can see that you want to speak as well. So this is really important. Otherwise, we'll just keep going and you won't have had a voice. So please let us know if you want to speak. Also, Julie, you're still with us. Julie, would you like to unmute yourself and speak to that? Basically, it's the idea of empowering people. Leslie, when you asked that, were you talking about artists who are leaders?
Yeah, you know, yeah, artists who are also, you know, we have, I mean, on this call, you know, I think Denise, you know, really exemplified that, you know, artists who are, you know, visionary, proactive community leaders who are, you know, dreaming about society, right? You know, and incorporating that in their art.
Great.
Okay, I see Julia has a hand up too. Do you want to go first, Julia, and then I'll try to respond to what's been said so far?
I just want to say yes to Leslie's question. I'd love to hear responses. I can chime in more, but I feel like it's a very pertinent, wonderful question to pose.
Sorry, I was.
Well, I guess I want to affirm that
Yourself
Leslie
again.
has just posed a really good question, and I'm definitely interested. I'm the owner of the Epitome Gallery. We are the home of Reworded, which is a program of the Ink People, and myself as an artist, I like to engage the community, and I've, you know, as a business owner, I'm trying to foster and create a space that fosters creativity and support and voice and give voice to a lot of what's happening in our community. And so I guess I have some ideas to bring to the table. And for me, I'm trying to figure out how I would maneuver in order to facilitate using these funds, I'd like to be doing work with the schools. There's an educational component, doing outreach and collaboration. I would love to hear more about what's possible. And I think Leslie had a really good question.
Okay,
Yeah,
go ahead.
go ahead, Julie.
Well, if you could just do me a favor and go back and recap that question specifically. I'm not quite sure how to respond to your question, but the next step in this process is now Eliza has been all over the North State or Upstate region and visited all 19 counties. That was the first step. And the next step now is to develop the guidelines for the regional applications. What I was typing an answer to Sean and probably not listening very well, so I apologize. Is not multitasking too well today. But the next step in this process is to develop the individual grant applications, which will be managed through the Upstate region, through Eliza's organization in Nevada County. So now the parameters of the individual applications will be a little more clear. We are having a training next week with the Healthy Places Index, and that is designed for the 14 administering organizations. So we'll have a little bit better clue of how to address those factors that we've been discussing so far this morning, and how that will relate to your projects, how we can assist the artists and the art organizations that are applying for the funding to address those issues, because that is one of the requirements of the grant, of course. So I think the next step now is, I'm sure that each administering organization is now in that process of opening the grant application process for the individual artists and arts organizations. And in that application part, there will be more information about what we're looking for and how to address the pillars of the program and that sort of thing. Maybe some suggestions and more sessions about what kind of projects can we do, and does my project fit into these parameters or not? So there's a little bit more guidance to come. This is sort of the beginning of going out and gathering this information. And I will say this about what Eliza has done in conducting these listening sessions and going out all over the North State to see all of you in person and listen to you and take your questions. And we're still collecting information. It's not over, but this part is like the first step to find out what all of you are thinking. What do you want to do? What proposals do you have in mind? And then we can take that back and go, yes, that does meet the parameters of this program, or not really, or how can we fine tune that a little bit more to help you? So now the next step is going to be the actual application for individual artists and arts organizations to distribute those funds.
Thank you so much, Julie. And there are some great questions. So one of the questions that's come up time and time again, and I just want to acknowledge Andrea, you have your hand up, so I'm just going to get to you. I'm going to answer this one question in the chat from Sarah Brooks, who says Southern Humboldt has a number of excellent programs that need support, like Recycled Youth and our mural group, that has a number of projects that need funding, but we are actively trying to organize the arts community in our region. And then Leslie has answered, thanks, Sarah, for your work in Southern Humboldt. I'm wondering if there is some argument to be made for places where there are fewer programs and programs like Recycled Youth that are serving a big community need. And I think, Julie, what Leslie's asking and what Sarah is asking is, do communities need to reinvent the wheel when they actually already have the most amazing, much loved, much valued community project that maybe has failed to thrive through lack of funding, and maybe there isn't a community foundation nearby, or whatever it is, or do we need to fund only new projects? And this has come up frequently, especially in our most rural areas. I wondered if you had an answer to that, Julie.
Okay, there. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
This question has come up too with us. You know, what we've been doing. And first, I want to just let everybody know there are 3 of us, arts program specialists, that were hired to help administer this particular program. So it's a big thing. As you know, it's a lot of money. It doesn't feel like a lot is coming to the Humboldt region, but it is a big program across the state. So there are 3 of us now that have been assigned to this particular program. And we've been meeting with each of our groups individually. Groups, I mean the 14 administering organizations. And in those meetings, that's what we're doing, is collecting information, getting questions answered, finding out, well, what is the California Arts Council really going to do to support you? So that question in terms of the funding has come up. And the answer is, it does not have to be a new project. It could be something that's already going on, but hasn't gotten funded, for example. Okay. The only concern we have in that regard, and that has been answered specifically so far, is that an organization or a specific artist is not allowed to apply to more than one administering organization. And what they mean by that, there's 14 of these administering organizations that have been awarded the funds, and then the funds will then be distributed out to all of you through your administering organization. But some of those groups are statewide. We have 3 statewide huge organizations that will be funneling out the money, as well as our local administering organizations, such as Nevada County. So, you know, that was the only restriction that they've come up with so far, is that you are not allowed to apply to more than one administering organization. Other than that, as far as your project, the main concern there would be that it does meet those pillars of the program, that it's trying to hit and address those issues that have been identified as the 4 core pillars of this program, which we were talking about in the beginning this morning here. You know, the part about economic equity, what's going on with the environment, health equity, and COVID response, and all of those 4 factors. That's really the main thing that they want to see, is that is going to be addressed in your art project.
I see Andrea's hand is up. I just want to make sure. I know. Thanks, Andrea.
Yeah, so I am just going to sort of recap and emphasize on things that I've heard just now that I think deserve to be restated. So as far as being able to effectively utilize this information that is being collected through these listening sessions, I'm thinking about ways that we can ensure that the informations about needs that are being collected have a way of being continuously intersected into every program. You know, and I know that there are certain things that are already in place, systems that are already in place to do that. Like when you gauge what needs are, when people, you know, how pressing those needs are, you know, based off of different marginalizations and things like that, you know. So like Denise spoke about, you know, there are like communities that have specific critical needs, and right, so like we have somewhat, it sounds like, of a framework for assessing needs, but I think what I am seeing that's missing is an intersectional network, so that every organization and every group at every level, whether it's an individual artist, an organization, or a funder, you know, like the organization, like the California Arts Council, we all have something across the board that after we're collecting this information, we can gauge a needs-based response that is something that everybody is on the same page about. So for example, though I have a Black-led organization and I'm trying to prioritize the needs of the Black community, I personally make it my business also to know what other marginalized groups and community needs are, but I don't have a visual for that for my community. And I did see that map that I can't remember the word that was used to describe the critical needs of each area and how those were determined. I forgot the specific word for that. If anybody wants to chime in, blurt it out. The
Healthy
gauge.
Places Index map, Andrea.
Yes, but the word that's used to describe how those
The
were
policy action areas.
the parameters or something. I can't remember which
Policy action areas.
the policy action area. No, I'm talking about like for example, there was something that gauged the health of neighborhoods. Those were called something, not parameters, but either way, if we have consistency and a system in place that's respected amongst all the people in this activism realm, yes, we're an artist community, but I've been a part of meetings where, just recently yesterday, we were meeting with about the cultural district, and we talked about how Caltrans wanted to support the arts, and then provided funding to the Ink people to kind of push that, which is a new, unique, relationship that's uncommon. So basically, what I'm trying to get at is, would the California Arts Council take it upon themselves to create a system around creating visuals and requiring these organizations to somehow at least be aware and show how each project is aware of all the issues that other communities are facing, and not taking on those projects, but incorporating the awareness of them through their projects, so that there is this collective, united intersectionality amongst issues, where everybody within their capacity is taking on a little bit and then able to report back, so that, once the reports go through, you have a way of collectively organizing how everybody is helping everyone. Like, for example, maybe my project through Youth Art Will Succeed gets funding to support Black artists, but maybe there's an initiative within that requires our Black artists to somehow address and work through and learn about, the issues that are going on with the migrant community and how those may intersect, or how our community can create art or create resources or activities that cross-engage where it is appropriate these other needs. I want to see this weaving in community where we're supporting one another.
I love
so
it.
that there's more cohesion. We need cohesion. But I don't think that any of us as smaller organizations or marginalized communities need to be put up to creating that. My work right now is just saying we need that from those who have the funding and the time to create that gauge or that system. So that's it.
Wow.
Thank
I
you.
love that, Andrea. I love that. And I guess my response to that would be, remember my disclaimer, I'm still a newbie with this program, first of all. And second of all, as Eliza mentioned, this is a pilot program, right? This is a one-time, here's a big chunk of money, go out and do this program. And, as we're learning about the program and how it's rolling out, of course, the big thing, as with all programs that the Arts Council does, is it going to be about the reporting at the end of the day. There, let me get that away. So, that what you're describing, the what we learn as a result of this program and how we're addressing these issues, and are we effectively hitting all of those points, that's going to be crucial as we're going along in this next year and a half to document that and show how we are addressing the issues that have been identified. I mean, to me, coming into this program and reading the grant guidelines and the parameters and how this thing was written, it's kind of interesting, and it seems a little strange at first, like who came up with the idea of addressing these parameters? But you are spot on in stating that the factors we're talking about trying to address with this program do go across, or they should be going across all of the programs that the Arts Council is doing, and how we're deciding who gets the money. One thing about this program I can tell you is one of the underlying goals is trying to reach and fund artists and arts organizations that are not typically funded. In other words, we don't want the money going to the same people that are always getting all the money. We're definitely trying to find people that are doing something new and distribute those funds more equitably. It has a lot to do with the way the grant was written in the first place, and how it got approval from the legislature, of course, and how we're going to address these topics. And that's why a large part of it has to do with workforce development and economic development. How, the funds have to go to artist salaries, for example, things like that. And then bringing in this part about the economy, the environment, health outcomes, all of those things are they're all really wrapped together, but it hasn't been broken out in such a way before in a grant application. So part of this is going to be what we learn as a result of this and how we share it throughout the state program. So I absolutely love what you're saying and totally agree with you.
Yeah. I mean, and I as like a small example, because I like results and I like to see things happen from conversations. I can see infographics at intersections that are already occurring, like the Ink People, or like community centers. I know Heidi works, I can't believe you still are at Jefferson Community Center, places where everybody in this group somehow eventually intersects, obviously California Arts Council, where we have a map of the results of what has been of information you've collected that show these needs. So they're on everyone's minds. You know what I mean? Just like we have a rainbow of needs. Some are more critical than others. How can we see them visually, acknowledge them, and weave those into the different levels as just an ongoing thing?
Thank you so much, Andrea. So we're kind of at time, but Gianna, could you please put the link to our website that we're developing into the chat so everyone has that at least, and if you could also include the Ink People and Humboldt Arts Council. So Humboldt Arts Council and the Ink People will be absolutely open to facilitating ongoing brainstormings around either specific projects or potential projects and potential collaborations and partnerships. And so we encourage you to get local with this. I wanted to acknowledge something that Marceau said in the chat, about the density of the information that you've received today. It is dense. We know it is. It's very unusual to be given both clear program goals, such as energy and water and climate and civic engagement and social justice and public health. These are huge, critical, dense issues. But then additionally, to be given such a specific tool that tells you about the relative health of your communities. So we know it's a lot to get your head around. And that's why we wanted to do these listening tours, to give you that extra time to get your head around it and to inspire you to have more conversations locally. Because we develop the guidelines, this is the time for you to be talking. So here you see all the links. We have a website that will be, by the time we share our grant guidelines, which we think will be sometime in February, it'll be filled with resources that we've shared today. There will be the PowerPoints available to you, and Spanish translations. Let us know if there is a community that wishes for the presentation today in another language. We'll do it for you. we already have the Spanish translations, but if there's a density or a population in need that needs it in another language, please let us know. I am so grateful to everyone for leaning in. Know that all the questions and everything that's recorded in the meeting chat will become part of our archive and will feed into our thinking around our grant guidelines. Did somebody put the next California Arts Council meeting, which is on the 8th, it's the day after tomorrow. If we could put that, please, into the,
Yes, so, Leslie and Jemima have shared that, Eliza.
That's fantastic. Good, good, good. Well, I think that's it. Is there any last question from anybody?
Well, I just want to say, I know a lot of people didn't get to talk. I'm going to be quick, so maybe someone else could talk, but feel free to email myself or Jemima. We're also going to be meeting up with Eliza and helping create these grant programs. So if you're just like thinking and you want to like give some input, please, we'll bring that to the table. It's really important.
Yeah, definitely. I know it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another, because we're both sharing this dense information and then expecting you to come in with questions, and then there's barely time. So Leslie will definitely, and Jemima will be absorbing these questions and passing them our way too. Thank you so much. Any last thoughts from the field? Julie, any last thought from you? It's great to have you with us today.
There. Okay, sorry. I don't have any last thoughts right now, other than to say that I hope that everybody that is on the call is aware that the next part would be any questions, concerns, additional information you might want to know about this program and how you can participate would be channeled through Eliza through the upstate region for right now. And then, as I mentioned, we have about every 2-week meeting with each of our administering organizations to discuss the questions that are coming up, what type of additional guidance is needed. We're developing information right now about the PR part of it, what the State Arts Council is going to be able to do to support that part of the program. But see, right now we're sort of in a little bit of a holding pattern, because the next step is going to be publication of the application guidelines. Okay, and that's where there will be more detailed information about what this program is really about and what we're looking for, and how you as artists and art organizations can participate in it. There is a pretty decent amount of information on the State Arts Council website about the California Creative Corps program. We are updating and adding to the frequently asked questions about that program as we speak. So we're putting in more information and the answers to questions as they're coming up. So check that out. It might address some of the questions that you have. And if not, please feel free to reach out to Eliza, or you can contact the California Arts Council directly at any time with any questions that you have, and those will be directed to our team to try to respond to you. Okay?